Hey guys, this is a new project I'm involved with, so if it sounds interesting to you, check it out and let me know what you think. Look, let's face it, the music business, especially today, is a bit of a crapshoot. I assure you though, there's nothing random, irrational, or lucky about making a good living in today's music business when you know what you're doing. So if you're a musician, composer, artist, or songwriter, and you want to know how to start earning serious money creating music while at the same time recession-proofing and pandemic-proofing your career, then check out this new free video training called Where the Money's Hiding in the Music Business in 2023. You can find it online at musicreboot.com, and this video shows you how to use your existing music and composing skills to create the financial stability you've always wanted. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. And a little quick story. About 6 years ago when I first started this show, I made a short list of guitar players that were my wish list, my dream team. And I'm very lucky and happy to have Andy Summers on because he was certainly on that list. So real quick, I want to thank Kim Estlin for hooking us up. I appreciate that. She's awesome. Obviously, everybody knows Andy Summers from the Police, but he's done some other cool stuff. I just want to give you a quick rundown. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2003. He's also recorded solo albums, collaborated with other musicians, composed film scores, produced albums, and he's authored books and short stories, and he's also exhibited his photography in galleries all over the world. A couple of fun facts. He's released, I think, 14 solo records. He recorded 2 albums with Robert Fripp, who he's known since they were kids growing up in England. He scored major motion picture soundtracks, including Weekend at Bernie's and Down and Out in Beverly Hills. Played lead guitar on Eric Burdon in the Animals album called Love Is. Early in his career, he played with Zoot Money's Big Roll Band, which is a bluesy psychedelic band. I know you know Andy Powell, right? Andy, right?
Well, I met him, yeah.
Because he saw you. I had him on the show recently, and we stayed in touch. And he told me he saw you at Zoot when he was 15. He saw you in Zoot Money's Big Roll Band.
Yeah.
That band then turned into Dantalian's Chariot, another psychedelic band. And most of my questions are originating from stories that I read in Andy's very well-written biography called One Train Later. Check it out. It's a really good read. And I actually listened to the audiobook, which is great. And there's also a film adaptation of the book called Can't Stand Losing You, Surviving the Police. Andy sold over 75 million records worldwide, and he's getting ready to embark on a pretty extensive USA tour, which we'll talk about. Man, thank you so much for a lifetime of music, and thank you for coming on the show.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
In the opening of One Train Later, you talk about how fast the journey went from you guys literally playing to a crowd of no one at a pub in London to playing in front of 70,000 people at Shea Stadium in 1983. What was it for you inside when you had that gig in London where no one showed up that told you to keep going in spite of that nobody was at the gig?
Yeah, it was daunting to it was early days for the three of us, but it was kind of, even so, you have pride, you have ego, and when nobody comes, it's a fairly daunting experience. Our wives came, I think, and that was 3 band members, 3 women, and that was the way it was, with a baby on the way too, probably. But it obviously, the real thing was then, and we just had to wait for people to cotton on. And it came in a surprising way because we weren't getting anywhere. All we did in the end was rehearse, which was very important. In fact, maybe it was a blessing that we didn't get invited to a lot of gigs because we weren't perceived as hardcore punk. And there was this sort of sickness that went through London for about 3 years that, you weren't supposed to be able to play and so on. It was pretty crazy. But so that forced us to rehearse a lot, and through that tremendous amount of rehearsal or practice, we found our thing, and then we went back out with it, and we came to the US, did that little tour up the East Coast, and we were then about to break up, and that was sort of the end. And Stuart's brother Miles, who was our manager at the time, suggested that said that we had an offer to play as a support act as sort of comedy rock group, the Albertos. Anyway, it's a long story, but we went down to Bath University and we were on stage at about 7:30, not expecting anything. And we went on stage, this place was packed and it was a total mob scene with girls screaming and throwing themselves on stage. It was for us, and that was exactly when we knew. The next night was the same. We did 21 shows with them while they stood white-faced at the side of the stage. And mayhem every night. And from there, it just went very fast. And, it was like a rocket ship.
Awesome. I really enjoyed the tales about you as a young boy, sort of wandering through the woods and
Yeah.
examining things, and you also you read everything and you listened, and to me it was clear you were a very curious kid, and I'm assuming you became a curious adult. I was curious, where do you think that thirst for knowledge or that curiosity came from?
Well, that kind of thing, yeah. I mean, I grew up in the countryside, and I mean, it all sounds corny almost, but I was actually surrounded by rivers and fields and woods and forests and that, and I was a complete nature freak at that time, wanting to know everything about everything. So, I mean, there was a curiosity there. I think that kind of thing really came mostly from my mother, who encouraged all that, as I kept all these little notebooks and read all this stuff and tried to be into it. Of course, that was before I got the guitar. Once I got the guitar, that all went out the window.
As it is for most
Yeah,
musicians.
yeah, yeah.
Early on, I mean, very early on, you were very influenced by and enamored by jazz. What about jazz hooked you? Because at the time, that wasn't the thing over there, especially.
Not well, yeah. I mean, we had jazz in the year, but what caught me was probably American guitar players. As I started to get into the world of guitar, and of course, once I got going, I'd learned all the chords and blah blah. Oh, not all the chords. You never learn all the chords. That doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
right.
But once I sort of was going quite well on the guitar, and then you sort of, that era, you would have passed through like trying to learn Shadows tunes. Cliff Richard and the Shadows. Hank Marvin was the lead guitar player, and that was pretty cool. They played simple instrumental music, more like the Adventures in the US,
Mhm.
sort of surf guitar and all that. So this was a sort of, it's getting into it a little bit more. But then as I went on and I started to get to grips with the guitar, somewhere in there, I must have heard, jazz guitar, and Wes Montgomery, of course, was like the leading star at that time. There were several others, of course, but Wes Montgomery took the lead, caught everybody's imagination, and of course he was an incredible, naturally gifted guitar player. And so I started listening to Wes and sort of trying to cop those looks. And of course, this sort of pushed my ear into hearing more advanced harmony, other chords. I wasn't just playing just basic blues chords anymore. I was starting to play real chord changes and learn the changes of standards and so on and so forth. And so my harmonic world became more sophisticated, and it was really through American jazz. And naturally I started with the guitar players, but then sort of as time went on, I'm thinking it was 17, I had a friend who played alto saxophone, and we were trying to learn everything on the bridge by Sonny Rollins. I was trying to
Yeah.
get the whole solos. He was playing very well then. So, I was sort of building up my repertoire of chords, licks, ability, how to play through more complicated chords. It was sort of coming. So, I was essentially self-taught, but, I was very, insane about it, studious and so on and so forth. No one showed me. I just started to figure it out. I had the ear for it.
Yeah.
So that was, unlike, a little bit later, there was the sort of blues boom in London, and
Sure.
everybody got into that kind of thing, because it was I didn't go there. I mean, of
Was
course
it
you learn to play all that shit, but I was more into Wes and people like that. Kenny Burrell,
Kenny Burrell? Awesome. Oh,
great.
uh,
Yeah.
shortly, speaking of the blues boom, shortly after you moved to London with Zoot, you bought a Les Paul 59 Sunburst for 80 pounds. Even saying that sounds ridiculous.
By 800 now.
Which you wound up selling to Eric Clapton for 200 pounds. And through Clapton, as you said the Les Paul wound up becoming the Stradivarius of guitars. And you brought up an interesting point in that in the book, and that if you hadn't sold Eric that guitar, it is possible the entire world of blues music might have been completely different. I was curious, did you ever have like a follow-up conversation with Eric about that down the line?
I saw him. Yeah, we were hanging out for a while there in those days, quite a lot actually. Somewhere in there, yeah. I didn't really take to the Les Paul. It's funny, and there was something wrong with mine. And I mean, it seems to be so symbolic, I gave him I sold him my Les Paul, and I got a white 58 Telecaster, which really suited me. And it was, in London at the time, that was a pretty radical looking guitar. There weren't, maybe I had 3 in London, So I felt, I don't know, for some reason, I liked the Telecaster more. And the Les Paul was like a heavy, weird little guitar, with this very overdriven sound. I think in my case, the back pickup wasn't quite right, although it didn't seem to bother Eric at all. It was all very new, and we were all sort of in a state of flux about which guitars were cool, what blah, 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 and things like Fenders weren't really around. To have a Stratocaster was pretty posh, That was
really? Okay.
Yeah. And these things, of course, by today's prices, they were very cheap. No one knew what they were, or did they even want them? And then, somewhere in there, I mean, before I went to London or anything, the 335 had arrived, which was a fantastic breakthrough. I mean, it was finally like Gibson got it right. They made the Les Paul, but the Stratocaster is sort of the ultimate guitar, the ultimate electric guitar. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, Leo Fender got that right.
Yes.
The only one that really challenged it, I think, from Gibson, they tried hard, was when they came up with the 335, and it became pretty much a universal guitar. I mean, any guitar player of worth is going to have a 335 and a Strat. Like, that's it. You've got to have those in the arsenal.
Sure.
I have several of each, but that's the way it is. Yeah, you got that nice red one on the wall. I've got one.
Oh my God, it's my number one. I don't. If that question people say, if you had a fire, that would be the one.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the sort of nightmare for guitar players. Okay, the house is on fire. What are you going to take? My mind goes. I have a little studioette at the end of my garden here in Los Angeles. There's a lot of nice guitars now. I sit racing down there to get I hope
not. It was really interesting to hear about, even though the Police had a #1 record at the time.
Yeah.
You guys were still living solely off your tour earnings, having to wait for like 2 years till you started receiving royalties. And as you said in your book, you said, we're winning, but it's inch by inch by inch.
Yeah, I did say that. Well, I do remember that.
Was that something everybody had?
We had #1s in virtually every single country, and we still seem to be living off the tour things. And of course, I think we were sort of the victims of, record company bureaucracy. All this money was coming in from all these places before we got to see the result. We did get there eventually, but I think it was a clear 2 years of massive success before we saw the actual financial rewards for it in terms of record sales anyway.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I mean, I guess back in those days when they're using spreadsheets on paper, maybe that's reasonable. I don't know. It seems a little far-fetched though.
Yeah, we were golden. We were the golden boys, but we couldn't really go in and start banging on the door and go, we want our money. But it did, eventually. Once it started, then it came, as I remember, fairly fast, regularly, and life changed,
Right.
We were okay then.
When you guys were recording Synchronicity, you had an interesting story there. To try and prevent a kind of a band breakdown, you walked across the island to speak to George Martin, who is also the owner of the recording studio in Montserrat where you were recording. To whatever extent you're comfortable, what did George say to you? Because that allowed you guys to get back to recording without any more stress, and you came up with that legendary riff on Every Breath You Take.
Yeah. Well, we reached a point of tension on Synchronicity. Yeah. We were almost at a standstill. We just couldn't seem to agree on anything. And we knew that Sir George was across the valley there. I mean, it's a funny story because, I think we had lunch and we decided the best way to sort this was, go and talk to Sir George, see if he would come over and produce the record. I mean, he was a legendary figure.
Yeah, worse things can happen, right?
Worse could happen. So I actually literally trudged off with a big sombrero on and sort of went down all the way through this valley. I mean, I've written about this, but these insane tropical forest I sort of passed through on his sort of dream walk. And up and the other side was his White House, which is where Sir George was. And
Guys, today's episode is brought to you by Lewitt Microphones. And for a limited time, Lewitt is giving Everyone Loves Guitar listeners 20% off any microphone in their catalog, including their top-end mics. Now, I've been testing this cool-looking Lewitt LCT 440 Pure for the last few months, and it's outstanding. And if you go to everyonelovesguitar.com/Lewitt, you can see my review of this microphone, as well as some other professional recording artists' reviews of two of Lewitt's most popular microphones, as well as get your 20% discount code. The mics come with a 30-day guarantee and a 1-year warranty, so there's absolutely no risk involved here. Just go to everyonelovesguitar.com/Lewitt, Lewitt, to get your discount code and to check out some short videos with in-depth information to see what recording and performing with Lewitt mics is like.
I got there and knocked on the door. The maid came out. He was there, and he said, "Oh, come on in. Let's have a cup of tea." Because we were who we were then, and we were in his studio, so of course he knew us all. And so I was expecting to lay our troubles on the line for him, but basically I said, we're having a bad time in the studio, it's not really, we're not getting along too well, and all that. And he went into his sort of naval commander stance, if you like, and sort of talked me down from the perch I was on. And it was like a great sort of kindly uncle said, I really think, look, we're British. We're going to sort this out. There's a job. It's that sort of talk, like,
we're British, we're going to sort this out.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And he sort of said, you have it in you. You're going to be able to do this. So it was one of those, I would like a great pep talk without him saying, all right, I'm going to come over and sort it all out. He didn't need the gig. He didn't need it. So, he gave me this heartwarming pep talk, and I slogged my way all the way back to the studio, and everybody was sort of sitting around in the control room. And then suddenly just the act of doing it seemed to change the whole atmosphere, because suddenly we were very nice to each other, and it was very cooperative. Oh, that's a good idea. Yes, okay, I'll play it the way you say you want me to. Under the breath, and and we sort of sailed on smoothly until the end of the record. That was it. Just a simple act of at least having a go seemed to change the whole atmosphere. And the record just unfortunately went straight to #1, and so that was the end of that.
Wow. So it's just like taking a break and just getting some
I don't know,
calm reassurance.
We cried out for help, and we were sort of self-healing, because we certainly knew how to play together and make records, and we had all the material there. I think it was, we were on our 5th record. Sting wanted to leave the band. Obviously, that was the underlying shadow to all this, which is going to be the last one, and of course he did. Yeah. And some of that frustration was coming out in the studio, I think. But he's the kind of guy, this is sort of English way. This is what I signed up for, and I said I'd do, so I'm doing it. Not like I'm bailing on halfway through the 3rd album. We completed the task,
right.
And you can think whatever you like about that, interpret it psychologically.
It worked, so there's not really much to interpret. Well, the results were pretty freaking amazing.
No, everything was an amazing success, but it was the beginning and the end. And I knew it. Like, this is the end. And actually, I think internally, I was sort of surprised that we got that far. I thought it would have gone before that.
Yeah, I got that sense from reading your book, because you kind of came to that conclusion early on.
Well, it's a typical band story where 3 sort of disparate characters get together, and they make a thing that works really well for a while. But it's inherently filled with tension, and that tension finally overcomes the whole project. We were lucky to get as far as we did, and it continues very healthily to this very day, I'm glad to say.
But, man, well, this freaking music's great.
Yeah, well, there you go. You see, and it's lasted all this time. It's never sounded dull or not fresh, so we did something good.
Yeah, you sure did. Hey, your first acoustic guitar, your Uncle Jim gave that to you. Do you still have that?
It's odd that you should say that, because I'm constructing a book now, right now. Well, in fact, I've done most of it. The idea of the book, it's going to be called The Trouble with Guitars. So, I had this idea that my life has been marked out by guitars. Guitar, it was 2 years, and I got another one. That was another year after, and I got another one, and so on and so forth. And I proceeded through life with a guitar marking this whichever period I'm in, until just it's a flood, and I've got hundreds of guitars, so it doesn't really apply so much anymore. But what I call the Uncle Jim Spanish was actually, it was my I think it was a cousin. He brought it over, but it belonged to Uncle Jim, who'd had it in Africa. And it was this little Spanish beaten to hell guitar with 5 strings on it. But it was magic to me. And, and once I got that in my hands, I never turned back. That was it. It was total obsession. And I recently, I'm thinking about this, I'm going to probably do this in August. I've done all the writing, because each essay will have, like, say, a photograph of the guitar and associated photographs. So it's the story of my life around that time with each guitar. Of course, it's all trouble, women, money, whatever, thieves, just difficulties of life. It's all in the wrapped around each guitar. Then I move on, and then there's another set of troubles with the other guitar. So I was trying to, that's the one guitar I don't have, but I believed it went to a cousin of mine, a girl who fancied herself as a sort of singer-songwriter for a while. And my sister got in touch with her. She lives in the sort of rural England. And she said, that whole thing, I gave it away.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You're supposed to get first right of refusal.
That I've got that. I can still try and track it, but pretty much I've got everything else, or I've got photographs of them. So I've got to have the 30 guitars, the 30 essays, and each one's got either at least a photograph of a guitar, or associated things like girlfriend, so on and so forth. There's a lot in there, and it's quite a lot of work to set it up. The writing was, in a weird way, it was the easiest part. It took a couple of years to finally get all the essays in place. And in August, I'm going to complete the task so I can hand it over to the publisher. Yeah, it's work. Well, what did I go? I said, how long it took me to put that together.
Yeah.
I mean, in my studio, I've got about 200 guitars, so I've got to pull them all out, decide whether I'm going to do them all, photograph them all in very separate, interesting places, or just get one set up. I don't know. I have to think about it. It's a little. It's an artistic project. I'll enjoy it, but yeah, it's going to take some time to do all that.
When you started writing, what how do you? I know you can't compare your enjoyment of writing words, books, or short stories to writing music, but you're pretty prolific. You got pretty prolific at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you feel these impulses. I mean, it took me a long time to get around to actually writing a book, which was One Train Later, but I just absolutely felt that I had it in me. I was always, I mean, being who I am, I'm always having to write essays, commentaries. I've sort of, once you become, let's say, well known, there's so many requests to, could you, write something about, yeah, okay, and I got very used to sort of writing really quite a lot, until finally it culminated in me writing One Train Later, which is not easy. I mean, there's all the beginning life, okay, and you get all that, and I was able to write pretty eloquently about all that starting out, and there's a sort of historical aspect to it. And then when it came to the police, which is just this fury of events, man, I had to how do you get this in the right order? So I actually literally had to do research on the career of the police, like this.
Yeah, I believe that.
And then we did this. Oh, well, then we went, until Christ, man, this. I had to figure it out. And the way I did it ultimately was I started to get this right, and in the studio where I was writing on the computer, I got it up on the wall like a very, very light piece of paper that went all around the wall.
Okay.
1979, 1980, 1981, until I sort of had the whole thing chronologically correct, you know, and all the details, so that when I did the actual writing of the period of the police, things were correct.
Yeah.
You know, so I think what I did was I sort of got the factual thing written out. Then I started to really write it like a writer and put in all the proper writing, and, you know, and all the juicy bits that weren't just factual. So, you know, it was a sort of methodology, if you like, a way to get it done.
I'm assuming you're also like always been a big reader as well, because good readers typically make good writers.
Heavy, avid reader, all the time.
Early on, you knew how important timing and playing rhythm guitar was. Was there anything you did on the guitar specifically to get so good at rhythm, or was this more a function of just like vigilant awareness and then application of that awareness to your right hand, you know, very consistently, deliberately?
Well, yeah, I am a natural musician. I am. That's what I got given. And when I was about 15, 16, I had some music lessons. Actually, I went to this guy because I used to play at this local jazz club, and he was the leader of the band. He was a tenor saxophone, fantastic player. And I wanted to play flute as well. And he gave me some lessons, but he said, you're a completely natural musician. So, you know, I was 15, 16. Ooh. But you know what it really comes down to, and this is really, for me, always the telling thing about any musician, and I played with so many people, time. You know, I didn't go, I'm a great rhythm player. I want to be a lead guitar player. But it's this feeling for time, how you phrase, where you feel it, where do you feel the downbeat, blah, 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 blah. That's it. That is the absolute marker between, you know, the gifted real musician and somebody who will never be that great. If you don't have that, you'll never be that great. You may learn to move your fingers fast, but it's never going to be the same. It's all about feeling for time before harmony, before anything else.
So you attribute much of that to just an internal gift, inherent gift.
It's an internal gift, you know. I mean, you only, you know, sure, you listen to records, you go phrasing, you know, you're coming in after the downbeat, and then, you know, you start with a triplet, or, you know, so on and so forth. This gets into real musical stuff, and you learn that by copying other people, and then until you build your own thing, you have a complete vocabulary. This just takes a lifetime. This doesn't come in 5 minutes. But I started off trying to like learn Wes Montgomery, so that's pretty tricky stuff.
Yes.
But through doing that, you sort of soak it up by osmosis. And so, you know, I would slow, well, we only had LPs then, LP down to 16 and a third or whatever. You know, trying to get it, you know, then speed it. Oh, so at full tempo, it's like this. But you soak up, you know, the feeling for time. You know, let's say you've got fancy notes in the phrases. What's he playing over B flat? Oh, he's playing over F minor 7 before instead of the A flat 7 chord. Okay, you're starting to take this shit in, you know. And when you hit the change where he goes to B minor 7, E7, he may play F sharp minor 7 and then go down chromatically. I mean, you don't, you know, at that age, I had no idea in terms of you know, theory, what he was doing, but I was getting it. I was getting it, developing the ear for the sort of sounds that were inside the scale, notes that were outside of the scale, and even more farther out notes, you know, the whole, that's avant-garde, you know. And so you start to kind of take it in. And at the same time, you know, the feeling for phrasing, you know, where you start a solo, is it before the beat, after the beat, whether you're going to use triplets, play 16ths, whatever, you know, all this stuff, you start to build this up, but it takes, you know, it's learning to improvise. And, you know, that takes time and a lot of listening.
So this is just hardcore nose to the grindstone work.
Well, you've got to. Hopefully you've got the gift anyway. And if it's musical, you're gonna get it and go, oh, that's cool. You know, and I get it. Not like, you know, you have to have the natural, your talent for it, I suppose. I hate to use words like that, but you have to have the natural inborn gift.
Sure.
And then, you know, you develop it. You can't let it be idle. And I think that's the difference between people from my generation and maybe kids now. I think it's so much harder for them to really buckle down and, you know, take the time that it takes to develop something like, you know, improvise freely over anything.
It's because of this thing.
It's a curse.
It is, man.
Curse.
It is.
I have grandkids, and man, the phone is the curse.
It is.
Yeah, no, put that bloody thing away and practice for 10. I played 10 hours a day when I was a teenager.
Yeah, right.
And loved it.
Right, right. It got total joy out of it. Exactly.
Total joy. I just love, working at all these things and trying to understand it,
And the feeling of accomplishment when you get it. And that's what people are denying themselves from today.
Yeah, sort of increment by increment. You start to understand more and more. Why is he playing B flat on top of A? Oh, but it sounds cool. Blah, blah, blah. Slowly this stuff comes, Yeah, anyway, yeah. The life of a musician. But you've got to love it. Yeah.
Long question. When the Police first got together, as you mentioned, punk was all the rage and long guitar solos are pretty much out. And so this led you to picking up and mastering an Echoplex, which shortly after that you added in a flanger, phaser, compressor, and fuzz box. Obviously, you continued down this road throughout your career in mastering effects the way you have and to the extent you have is a full-time job, almost like mastering another instrument. And I was curious if you had a vision. Like when you first came upon these things, did you have some sort of vision of where these things might be able to take you if you could master them? Or, what was it that hooked you? Because to me, you in particular opened the door for people like, say, The Edge to then come in and create his own style of play using effects.
Yeah, I think, well, at that period, there wasn't much of this around, and I do think I sort of led the way somewhat in that sense of sonic possibilities. Because I was playing through a Fender Twin, and eventually this thing called a Phase 90 came out, and it was like, wow!
I got really sitting right on the floor there, yeah.
Kind of daft sound, but I started to, these things just started to become available in the sort of late 70s, and then they came up with a chorus pedal, which of course was this gorgeous sound. And I thought, in practical terms, well, we're playing on stage about an hour and 45 minutes. Man, I've got to make the guitar interesting somehow. And I've got to try to open up, have a kind of a sonic rainbow going on behind the vocalist. So it's not just, hardcore, bass and treble through a Fender Twin, which is, of course, completely authentic and great as well. And there's moments for that. But get this huge stereo effect of the chorus coming out through the PA system, and then playing a solo with a great fuzz box. These things started to become, what's the right word? De rigueur. You needed to have this stuff, and so I sort of pushed on into it, and I had quite a lot of pedals on the floor, and eventually, I met this guy in London who was sort of leading the way. He was an engineer, tech guy, and a guy called Pete Cornish.
Oh yeah.
And I think Dave Gilmour had a board by then.
Totally.
Yeah. So they said, Andy, you got all those pedals on the floor with all that Scotch tape on the floor. What are you doing? Don't you know? So eventually, of course, I did go to see Pete Cornish and got on well with him, and he made me my first pedal board. If I've still got it, I've got that.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, $1 million if you want it.
Do you accept PayPal?
Well, I keep these things because I think they were, in a weird way, they were blessings in my life. The Telecaster, the Cornish board, the Echoplex. They're not for sale, but so with Pete, I hooked up a lot more inside a flat board. He would take the pedals out of their cases and lay all the electronics out, and then on the board. It's fairly primitive by today's standards, but they're very sort of loving. We sort of love those boards. In fact, I had mine out about a week ago with buttons, with markers of what each pedal was. I had a sort of a envelope filter in there, wah, a couple of different echoes, a couple of different fuzz boxes, the chorus, of course, and then the Echoplex separately, so I could, run. I started to work out, okay, on the verses, I'm going to play with this setup, Then I'm going to hit a few more pedals for that. Then I go to this for the solo, and then I come back this way. And I used that board for many years, with the police, and never felt a need for anything else particularly.
But you worked your ass off mastering that.
Yeah, well, I got better at, combining sounds, lots of rotary knob twiddling.
Right.
And we're back to it, because I don't know if it's a guitarist in particular, but we seem to be blessed with a certain amount of nerdiness because, after the Pete Cornish R era and all that, and they got into the late 80s and all that, and then it all sort of went digital and everybody had rack mounted stuff. And I got into that because I met Peter Frampton. Well, I knew him anyway, but we were in New York in a studio together one day, and he had this incredible rack mounted gear. And I went, wow. And it was way beyond what I had. And he said, oh no, you got to go see Bob Bradshaw. He was very open to sharing it. And so it was a guy called Bob Bradshaw who was in Los Angeles. And I went and sort of emulated Peter and got all this stuff. But now it was all digital and it was all rack mounted. The thing I ultimately found I didn't like about it was that the sounds were too fixed. That was it. I was all right. Well, I can't get out of it now. That's where it is. Unless I stop playing, I go over and I have to redial everything. Didn't want to do that. The pedals on the floor were more friendly, more nerdy, and I think the whole guitar community slowly came back to that by about mid to late 90s. The digital rack thing didn't. I mean, obviously everybody used it, but it sort of went away, and guys came back to pedal boards on the floor. Right. And then the great renaissance of guitar pedal making got underway, and we've been, with it ever since. There are thousands of guys in the US alone making pedals that you operate on the floor.
Absolutely.
And they love it. They love making their pedals. And that's where we are. And we all went back to the floor. And I'm going out on this tour with pedals on the floor. I'm very happy about it because I like to go down and go, just going to tweak that, that's it.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
And, so that's the way it is. And it's very sweet in a way. I love all these little garage operations all over the US where these guys are in there like soldering and welding and trying to do that. But we've got to the stage where, there's sort of the standard sounds. And I'm always looking for the guy who's got a completely freaked out, weird sound. That's what I want.
Right.
Stuff. I've got a few that do like stuff like that. And there are a few pedals with my name on them. So, yeah. In fact, I just did one with Mike Matthews in New York. It's called the Walking on the Moon pedal.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice. It's very nice. We sort of had a little bit of interaction. It's sort of basically a chorus pedal.
Right.
But, and it's a sort of special edition, some nice design on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've set the standard for that, man. I want to talk to you about some of my few of my favorite Andy Summers musical moments. Driven to Tears from Zenyatta Mandana. I was talking with, I got a friend, Doug Bossy, and we were talking about how your solo on that studio recording's so amazing because, I listened to it and the notes are all dissonant, but when you put them all together, it freaking sounds like amazing. How the hell did you come up with that?
Well, I mean, I just have all those sort of things. I mean, partly playing a solo like that with that sort of dissonance in it, that's kind of angry and edgy, was because of the lyric itself.
Right.
It sort of goes with what the lyrics are about. You didn't want a sweet bluesy solo in the middle of that, like, oh, and actually everything's all right. You wanted an angry solo, and so that. I mean, as far as I thought it out, I knew that I'd, at least play a minor third and a flat fifth and probably a flat seventh somewhere in that solo to get it to have the kind of angst that would reflect the lyrics. So it's like that.
When you created that solo, if you can remember, it was a while ago, was the first first
30 seconds.
was the
time before that.
Was the first take close to what the final take was?
Probably one take.
You're kidding me.
I didn't sit there and work for hours. It's very quick. Every breath you take, that's one take.
Wow. Wow.
I'm good at this shit. That's why I've been doing it.
I'm good at this
You
shit.
say that. Well,
That's gonna be the subtitle for your interview. Andy
I've
Summers,
been
I'm
doing it
good
a
at
long
this
time.
shit.
I mean, whatever.
And
Yeah,
hey, man, you are good at this shit. You can say it, man.
that's a terrible thing to say, but why would I be here? Otherwise, you'd be talking to me. You have to be
Right.
careful. But there's a lot of practice and thought and devotion to the art of it all. And so when a moment like that comes, you're prepared.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
how to make the right choice, and hopefully you got the chops to do it.
Well, man, that was very right choice. You have on your solo record, Triboluminescence.
Mm.
You have a track called "If Anything." It's a very beautiful, sad instrumental that's quite powerful, especially from the droning that's going on in the background. It's so strong. I was curious if there was anything in particular going on in your life when you wrote it, or like just what's the backstory to that track, if you remember.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can't say, oh, well, I was, I like very melancholy music. I mean, basically, sad music is the best. Don't really like happy music. Sometimes something like that can work, but it's probably got to be Italian and in a movie. No, I mean, I like the soulful, searching kind of thing, and I think it was one of those things, the sort of thing that I've usually got under my belt in one form or other. I like pretty quirky music, or I like soulful, music like that. That's the kind of thing I go for. I mean, it's definitely not bebop and it's not rock, so it
Right.
searches goes to another place that's more sort of. I mean, possibly like big influence on me was ECM Records.
Okay.
With all their, it's a German label, but they've got Yangar Barrett and great musicians on it. But a lot, it's sort of the school of jazz, jazz, all the different schools of jazz, and you get through Coltrane and you get into the 60s, and then it sort of turns into something else. Miles takes it out, it gets into funk and all that stuff, and it gets kind of lost for a bit. And then along came in the early 70s ECM Records with Manfred Eicher. And they started, this other sound sort of came about that, was really played by jazz musicians, but wasn't the sort of, bebop of the 40s and 50s and jazz in that sense. It was a more lyrical, modal, sort of melancholy, haunting kind of music, which was generally the ECM sound. And that was a big influence on me at the time I was very drawn to it musically.
Yeah.
And I think that that track, if anything, is along those lines.
Yeah, really pretty
track years ago that this friend of mine, journalist, great music journalist, oh, so why don't you do that again? Like a piece called "A Thousand Stones," which was a sort of 10-minute improvisation, almost into a cassette recorder. So I remember but it was so good that he said, "Christ, the recording quality is not there." I think it's on the Golden Wire. But we put it out. So the music was more important than the actual recording quality, and I'd certainly believe that, music first.
Do you remember what guitar you played on that track, if anything? Because it sounds great. Like I thought it might have been a Strat at first, but it was hard to tell.
Probably is a Strat.
Okay.
Probably a Strat. I basically played 2 guitars this year. I'm going to get all these guitars sitting around, but it's mostly what I have is it's usually a Strat. I've got one old red Strat that I just tend to pick up all the time, just out of sheer laziness. But it's a great guitar. I'll be taking it on tour, and a 335, an old 335.
Yeah,
sounds great. Plays great.
Phenomenal.
I've got all those. Yeah.
You have a track on World Gone Strange. I don't want to butcher the name. Udu
Matt Kanjara.
Yes. So I absolutely love that track between Tony Levin's bass and you playing a melody which sounds like it's based on like a raga scale.
Yeah.
What's the backstory to that track and also the mix, the engineering on that was phenomenal, man.
Yeah. Well, I worked with a great guy for a few years called Eddie King, and I don't know, he finally disappeared. I think we did about 5 albums. He had his own studio, and he was truly a recording engineer. He was a very good musician too. Well, in the general thing, I've made, I think, 15 solo albums, plus several collaborations. I'm looking for, your own voice, which is not just standard jazz, standard rock, anything standard, but unique. And, I come at it the way I come at it. And so I think looking for a melody like on Udu Kanjar, I'm just trying to remember how it goes. That's where it comes from. It's for trying to, purposely find something like that. And because I was making album after album a year then.
Yeah.
So I was always sort of composing. I was very into it. Right now is the biggest break I've ever taken since, I've been doing all this, and I just sort of get back to it. Maybe this summer. I want to make a different kind of record. Yeah.
I love that track. Was that a soprano sax on there, or was that a synth?
If it's a soprano sax, yeah, would it be a guy called Bill Evans? Actually,
Oh yeah, I know who that is. Of course, yeah, the great Bill Evans.
Great music. We went on tour together.
That's interesting. You mentioned that you play primarily the Strat right now, and the 335. What year Strat? Talk about those. Your go-to guitars right now. The Strat is.
Well, yeah, and I'm playing the Strat. Actually, the Strat that I'm playing is my Stratocaster in the Police was a 1962 red colored Strat that I bought in Austin, Texas for $400. That was the one that went pretty much all the way through the Police with me. And later, I think in the early, I can't even remember when I did it, but maybe it was for the Police reunion tour. Fender just made 2 copies of it.
Okay.
Almost better than the one. So I'm playing one of them.
Okay.
So they reproduced my red Strat. And so I've got that one I'm going out with. I'm very comfortable with it. And I've got a Gibson 336. Beautiful.
What's a 336?
Yeah, it's a sort of scaled down version of the 335.
Okay.
I don't know if they even make it anymore, but
I don't think so. I've heard of the 339. That's a scaled down version. I've seen that now, I think.
Yeah. Well, mine is a beauty, and I don't think they made that many of them. And mine's got this beautiful kind of flamed wood. It's a very nice guitar. So I've got that, and I'm also going to do in the show. I do because my life has been so involved with Brazil, and it's such an influence on me that I do a Brazilian section with some, photography. It's all shot in Rio and Carnival, which is incredible. But I've got a special guitar made by a guy called Mike Peters. We're just changing the neck on it, oddly enough. It's got great pickups at nylon string, so I'll be playing, so it's more Brazilian. But he's making a new neck for me, which I should get in 2 days' time, and I'm bringing that. So I'll have those 3 guitars as we'll see how we get on,
Yeah.
I mean, we're sort of locked down, but you never really lock down everything completely because, you go out and then you're in the real situation, and, things come to you and it changes, I'm pretty good generally with, like I do my faux police band in South America, and I always take that Strat, and it gets me through everything, no problem.
Yeah. Why is Brazil, you mentioned, that's been such a big influence on you?
Yeah. Well, when I was 16, people say, well, where does all this photography come from? And all that, like all that. Well, I was, like you said, I was a pretty curious kid about everything. And one of the things that was a big feature of my life at that time was going to the place called the Continental Cinema and seeing so many foreign, French, German, Italian, Swedish art house films. And, they were a huge influence on me. And of course, they pretty much were all in black and white. But that was a big cultural thing for me. If you want to say, what is it? Come on. Well, I was seeing all these films by, Bergman and Fellini and Truffaut and Agnes Varda and so on and so forth, soaking all the stuff up this other world. It was like, you live in rural England. Well, here's your introduction to the world. And it was through all these movies. And one of the movies I saw, and I didn't even know where it was Black Orpheus, which is a wonderful film about Brazil, filled with great melodies by Luis Bonfim and Antonio Carlos Jobim. And, it knocked me out of the park. And I heard that song called Manhã de Carnaval. Oh, it's a beautiful melody, great chord. So, these were very impactful on me. And, as it turns out in my life, it's just one of these ironic things. I didn't even know where this was. All these people, the Carnival, the mountains, Rio. for a little English kid, it was incredibly exotic.
Yeah.
And as it turns out in my life, I hooked up with somebody in Brazil when I did an acoustic guitar tour there years ago. Well, actually, it was I think it was about 95, actually. We met this guy and we really hit it off, and he invited me back, and I played with another guitar player, and we started to go from there. And I've never missed a year since. Sometimes I've been even 3 times in a year. Now, at the moment, we're doing this very great Police knockoff band. Well, it's got me in it, so it's semi knockoff. The band is called the Police. It's fantastic. We do all Police hits, and it's very popular. We sell out everywhere.
And you toured down in Brazil for that?
Well, Brazil, Argentina, Chile.
Okay.
We just did Venezuela. And actually, we're playing at the end of September in Mexico City and a couple of other places. Then I think, there's sort of a plot going on to go to Recife in the Northeast in February, see if that works out. And then the drummer can do it in July and August, which is a great time to go because it's the winter.
Right.
So it's a really good time to yeah. So that's great fun for me.
That's awesome.
Songs, killer, great players, great singer. I mean, it's a very good band. I wouldn't do it otherwise.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the thing about doing something like that, you go, well, I would never do that with anybody else. I couldn't possibly. But actually, I have to say, these guys are fantastic. They're real musicians. They're rockers. They're great players. So there's no drop in quality.
Do you stretch out on solos there?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I would imagine that must be liberating to be able to do that.
Longer guitar solos.
Yeah, that must be
the bass player gets over in front, and Rodrigo, and he gets right up to me, and it's wonderful. Yeah, it's a very joyful time. We always have a laugh. It's really good fun.
And what's the name of that band?
It's called Call the Police.
Call the Police. Right. I'm sure there's some YouTube videos on that.
Yeah, it should be something around. We've never we always think, we've got to make it, we always talk about it. We never sort of get around to it. I don't know, it's like Italy in that sense. It's like Brazilian organization. But, the gigs, it's a real thing. I mean, it's a band. We have about 11 people in the crew. And we have beautiful places to play. So it's all organized. So you have to keep to really do it. We were I usually go to Rio for about 5 days ahead, 6 days ahead. There's a hotel I like to stay in. So I get over the flight and all that. And then we rehearse for about 3 days. In fact, it usually takes a couple of afternoons and we have it back together.
That's cool, man.
Pretty quick. Well, you know what? They rehearse. I think what they do is Rodrigo and João, they rehearse with another guitar player. So they get their stuff together.
Yeah.
I sort of run it up here on my own. We get down there and off we go,
Yeah, so you're all prepared already.
Yeah. We sort of semi are ready to go, so it doesn't take long. And off we go. Yeah, I'm looking for. Well, I've just been communicating in the last 2 days, and I hope we do Recife. I haven't been there for a while. I've done it in the past, but we can do Recife. Maybe Manaus, which is way up on the Amazon, and the other one that's on the Amazon. So it's sort of a northeast tour. I mean, it's a big country.
Yes, Brazil is.
See how it goes. Yeah.
I was wondering if you're comfortable maybe sharing one or two mistakes that you might have made on your journey, and what were the lessons that you learned from these mistakes?
Yeah. Gosh, where do you want to start? We're never going to get off this.
Thank you for that response. That was awesome.
Yeah. It's all mistakes, basically. Did you ever get anything right?
But isn't that life to some extent?
Well, it is, yeah. Well, I don't usually make musical mistakes because, that's what I do. All the rest is like, oh, God, Well, I mean, I can't get really explicit here, but I mean, I think you have a vivid imagination. You can imagine.
Yeah.
With women. Well, not drugs. I'm not that person. I take it seriously, I think you pass through different phases, But I mean, for me, the guiding principle through all the sort of rock and roll days and all that, and I mean, you're in a band, you're out at night, after all that.
Sure.
But the guiding principle is, you're on stage tomorrow night, you better ought to play.
Right.
You can't take drugs to do it.
Yeah.
So, and I would say, luckily for us in the police, I think, once, we became like the major attraction in the world. I mean, it was like every drug dealer in the world must have tried to get to us. I mean, this was what's going on. It's part of that scene. And I think we learned really pretty early on that, man, we play a very intense show and we have to be able to really play our asses off on this, because you can't be drugged out doing that stuff. So we didn't go that way, and the rule is, man, you've got to be able to play your instrument and you've got to get out there and kill on it every night.
Right.
Which way are you going to go? Are you going to do it with the aid of drugs, or are you going to do it because you keep yourself together? I mean, I'm not saying like preachy or
no, but you had to keep, that was your priority, and
it is a priority.
You can't fuck that up.
No, you can't fuck it up. And the real joy and the real high has come from, God, what a great show. That was one of our best shows ever. It was that kind of thing. That's where the high is, I know you have to learn to handle yourself through all these, possibly difficult life situations, how to moderate, you have to take care of yourself, your physical self, and your soul as well, I think.
Was that tougher I don't know the answer to it. It's always tougher as a younger person to figure that out.
Yeah, I think probably, raw youth is just an invitation to, trouble. And a lot of people don't make it, and they're still really quite young, and it's all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were young. I think one of the things that was pretty good with the three of us was that we actually did watch out for one another. People go, "Oh, you guys hate it." No, we didn't.
That was great.
We kind of kept an eye. You could say on a very hard-headed level, this is business. Actually, it's music, but we need to keep this together. Somebody's paying a lot of money tonight to be here. We have to put on a great show. And we did every night, but you have to keep your sort of whole being together to be able to deliver the goods,
Yeah.
I mean, there is a certain amount of playtime involved because, we were out there, traveling over the US, and we were, everybody wanted to be with us all the time. They'd line up outside the hotel trying to get into our rooms. It's sanity, it was insane. In the end, the last year or so, when we had Synchronicity and all that, I mean, we had bodyguards with us at all times.
Sure.
Corridors locked off. Got bodyguards at either end of the corridor. I mean, it got sort of to a point of, this is sort of a joke now. Yeah, sort of like the Beatles, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's just, no one could. You'd get mature grown-ups coming to interview us, and they couldn't keep their shit together. They'd be sort of trembling, like, because we had all the power at that point. It was sort of amazing, like fully grown people, like sort of shaking in front of us. Yeah.
Wow. So fortunately, it sounds like for all three of you, you all had pride of ownership. You all operated at a high level musically, and you were smart enough to know that's what we got to keep on point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we were supposed to be the greatest band in the world. We were selling millions of records, and we couldn't be a big letdown when people paid a lot of money to come and see us.
Yeah.
Had to be even better than that they thought. And we had to have a great show, everybody with us. Oh, that was great. That's what we were looking for every night. Yeah. And also, I got to say, it was a lot of fun for us because we were doing what we do, and we were really well. We were a great band. And we get up these people just gaga to see us, and cheer us on. I mean, we'd won. The minute we stepped on the stage, we'd won the whole thing. But then, we do the show as well. But it was a fantastic experience to go through, almost unrepeatable. Very few people get that, I think.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, it's great that you had the collective work and the separate and collective work ethic to just keep that together, because I think a lot of times people lose that. There's so much of that external becomes part of like bigger than the show itself. And I
You
think
see that in so many bands where, one of the bass player goes off and he can never really play again, and it's over. That wasn't the way. I mean, when you're in a trio, that's real tight. There's not much room for slack.
no room for margin,
I'm
no
paying
margin for error.
total, radar-like attention to the way Stuart's playing. Whatever, you're fully in the moment when you're in a trio. Like I can't slack off and go, I'll come back in a minute on the third verse. No.
Yeah.
Never stop.
Yeah.
And I think we all did have a pretty good, working, feeling about, we worked at it, and we liked working at it and making things better and better, yeah, it was a very vital time.
What's the best decision you ever made?
Well, remarrying my wife, maybe.
Right.
Seems sort of stupid because we were married. Police broke up the band, broke everybody's marriage. We all got divorced. And, the love of my life disappeared. I don't blame her. But then, things happened, the band came around, we got back together. That was probably one of my better life decisions, let's say. Had 2 kids immediately.
That's nice, man. That's a nice thing to hear. Hey, I want to talk about last question. Any before we just talk about your show upcoming, any final words of wisdom?
I don't know if I've got any wisdom. I mean, they're all cliches.
Cliches are good though, man. Cliches are good.
Well,
they exist for a reason.
They're all, I just sound corny when you say this kind of things. Like, well, you should never lose sight of the target, whatever it is for you, be kind to animals.
Be nice. Yeah, man, that's a good one. All right,
let's talk. Be a good person, and you got to. Well, I mean, if the ideal world, you have great success because you do something really great, and you get recognized for it, but you've got to be a good person throughout it all. You can't start being an asshole at any particular time, and very difficult. Can be very difficult if you get into those realms, So.
Well, that's good. That's as good wisdom as anything. Be a good person. Hey, let's talk about your upcoming tour. So this is a multimedia sort of interactive tour. Talk about how it's going to be played out.
Well, I finally, after all these years, managed to combine my photography, which I've had a whole sort of sub-career on. I'm book 5 now. Latest book came out a few weeks ago called A Series of Glances. It's on Amazon and in good bookstores everywhere.
No, and it's a good there was you had some photos in there, man. They were like this is from a foreign country, correct? They were all from
all over the world.
Yeah, they were really cool.
Quite a lot in China, India, Japan. Yeah, which is what I've done. So this show combines, we usually have a cinema-sized screen, so these images look amazing when they're up on the screen. So what I've done is worked out all these various sequences, and I play each one. I've worked out a kind of way I'm going to improvise to it, with all my
to the photos,
to the photographs. Yeah, so they come up with a cinematic sequence, and then I'm improvising my way through it. So really, the song is whatever strikes me that night. Not on every single piece, but I've got these kind of free sections with this very exotic photography. So that's some of the show, and then the others I've used a couple of tracks off some of the last few records where I use the backing track. Of course, I not re-record it, but I bring up the recording again. So now I have the space to play the lead guitar in. So there's a few like that, and then I play some solo stuff. I do a Brazilian section with a lot of the photography I've done in Brazil, and of course we end up with I've got Roxanne and Message in a Bowl and Spirits of the Material World being on the night. So we pay tribute to those guys, and
those guys. That's like another, like you're talking about it like it's another entity. Yeah. Does it feel like that though sometimes?
I wasn't really doing much of that before. What I used to do, I work out a very nice. I play the whole of Message in a Bottle as a solo guitar piece, which was really nice. We'd run this collage, but because of modern technology, I'm able to play with the original backing track and play it as a lead guitar line. It's exciting. So it's a pretty full show, and I'm going to read a couple of stories out of Fretted and Moaning. People like you to talk. So
Yes.
singer, the vocals are already done by, yeah, I'm going to talk to you now, and they like it. So
Yeah.
giving it quite a lot of chat as well.
You do a good job in the short stories of resolution. Like it's very hard to write short stories because
Yeah.
it's you don't have a lot of space. You have to keep
You
it
got to be
short.
nice. Yeah.
And you have to be extremely economical with your words. But I read a couple of stories that were sent over to me, and you did a really good job of like resolving in a very clever, very British clever way, actually, of these stories. They were pretty cool, and called Fretted and Moaning, that book, correct?
Yeah, and I think we're going to sell it, like blah, 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 merchandising on the tour.
Yes, bring your credit cards if you come to these shows
Yeah,
because
no, I
there'll be
think
a
they're
lot
going
of
to make a
merch.
special sort of softback edition for it because it's been out in the US. Yeah, I can't even remember how I wrote that book now, but it must have taken me a while to do it.
Do you like writing short stories? It's
Yeah, I
tough.
love the stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're all
Yeah.
musical. They all have a musical,
Well,
thing.
I started with the obvious, but I mean, yeah, there's a guitar in most of them, but it's
Yes,
really just a sort of symbol because what's really interesting is the human interaction and everything around it.
right, right.
You just put the guitar in another situation like that.
Yeah,
But
it was.
take imagination and rewriting and rethinking. I mean, it's not effortful. But you have to stay on it and really think through your ideas to get the most clarity. And is it building as a story? Yeah, so on and so forth.
Do you
Yeah.
find writing is not hard, but editing is like where the pain comes in?
I think it's hard to get an idea, and you've got to get the idea and you've got to extend it. And then no, actually, I think getting the whole thing is one thing, and then the kind of, in a way, the fun part is editing, because once you start revising, you're making it better. I mean, oh no, that's a paragraph too low. Let me put that idea up there. So I've already introduced it, but I want to say it slightly differently. There's the act of writing, and taking out anything superfluous. So it's you sort of dry it out in a way. It's too wet, too wet, too wet. Dry it out, make it tighter, and
Tighter, yeah.
it's similar to making records in a way, or anything,
Yeah.
the act of editing. So you start off with a big thing, and then you get it tight and really more to the point, and it moves. Yeah, it moves better, but it's a scary thing because you love your little babies you got in there, and then you've got to kill the babies. It's killed. Get rid of that. Yeah, I know it was a great sentence, but you don't need it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Well, your playing is very economical. You've done a masterful job at. You don't find
Well,
too many.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you don't find
Well,
too
we live
many
in a world
stray
of,
notes.
well, it won't be on like that on the tour. There's going to be guitar solos all night long.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it. I play a lot. I playing a lot these days. One of the best things that came out of the pandemic for me is one of my kids. He's actually teaches martial arts, but he's a very good drummer. And he said, "Well, why don't we?" We're all hanging around, not know what to do. The best thing that came out of that period for me was we started playing together 3 or 4 times a week, 5 times a week. And he really likes to play swing, jazz. So I know all this stuff inside
Yeah.
out. So we play a lot, and so from nowhere, of course I play the guitar every day, but instead of just practicing with a metronome, I'm playing with my son.
That's really cool.
So it is really cool, and
Yeah.
it's really helped me because my chops are coming up. Because I'm playing with him. I'm playing about 500 guitar solos a week at the end of the garden. So it's been a great benefit. But that came out of that weird situation we all passed through. But so now it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It did. We've sort of got out of the pandemic. We didn't stop. We're like every day.
That's great, man. Really nice. And you're doing this tour covers pretty much the whole country, correct?
It will do ultimately, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we got this little run, first 8 shows, I think, on the East Coast. Then I got 2 in Texas in August, and then Then we start heading up the West Coast in September. We go all the way up to Vancouver, and then I know I go to like Chicago and then Canada and all that. Yeah, I mean, it goes on. And there are more and more requests coming in. I've said the way we're trying to set it up is I can do like, say, 5 shows back to back, then take a week off.
Right.
So it's not like 6 months on the road.
It's pretty extensive though, man. I looked at your tour.
Yeah, it's more than I was sort of bargaining for, but
yeah,
let's see how we get on, you know. I mean, I hope I love it. I don't know, you know, because it's been a while since I've really traveled in the US like that. I mean, hopefully it's, you know, stimulating.
Well, your very last show is down here, so I will be there.
Where are you?
I'm in Tampa, so you're playing in Clearwater, I think. Your very last show. Yeah, it's right across the bay.
4 shows in Florida, I think.
Yeah, you're doing several shows. I was surprised because it's hard to tour Florida. It's really vast. It's big.
Yeah,
yeah, but you're doing quite a few shows here.
Yeah, I don't know whether I want to do that or not, but I have to go straight to London from Florida to do some stuff there. So it's actually working out. It's better for me. I don't have to fly from LA.
Save 3 or 4 hours. Yeah. Well, Andy, listen, I can't thank you enough for your time. Everybody, go to andysummers.com. His tour, that's your website. It's just andysummers.com, right?
Or it's on my
Instagram
every day. It's all there. Yeah.
Yeah, and please check out the show if he's coming to your area. And man, I want to thank you for spending your time here with me, and thank you for a lifetime of good music. And I hope to see you in December. Hang on one second. Anything else you want to leave or tell people?
Please come to the show and
bring your credit cards. Hang on a second. Thanks for everything. Take care, man.